Why don't we begin now with Mr. Statler from Amtrak.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Good afternoon. On behalf of Mr. Boardman and the Board of Directors, we greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here to testify. Again, my name is DJ Statler. I'm the Vice President for Operations for Amtrak. As you know, we at Amtrak like to call ourselves America's Railroad. We operate over 21,300 miles. We provide service to 500 different communities in 46 states. As bus and airline services have contracted in recent years, they focus more and more on urban corridors. We've begun to play a progressively larger role in serving America's heartland. Our network reaches about 40% of the rural population of America. Over that network, we own very little trackage of our own outside of the Northeast, and we operate most of our traffic, a total of 70% of our train miles, on tracks owned by other railroads. These are what we call our host railroads. I'm here today to discuss the performance of Amtrak's services on these host railroads, which has deteriorated significantly over the last year. As the delays from host railroads mount, our on-time performance, or OTP, continues to decline. Here in North Dakota, we offer a single train a day in each direction, our Empire Builder service, which is run on tracks owned by BNSF. I know this issue has concerned the board, and I very much regret that I have to start this conversation by telling you that the performance of our long-distance trains in general, and this train in particular, has continued to deteriorate since you saw me last April. The long-distance trains are a core Amtrak public service and a vital part of the interstate passenger rail network. They generate a substantial portion of our ridership Amtrak-wide. These 15 services are the only Amtrak trains on about 70% of our system and the only services at half of our stations. In most places, again, like North Dakota, the service is a single daily train in each direction. They provide essential service to many areas that increasingly are lacking mobility choices. On average, they're as full as our Acela service trains are going up and down the corridor. That's how many passengers ride each day. On-time performance closely correlates to customer satisfaction. That obviously affects ticket revenues and costs. It also affects the connecting revenue as people change trains in the major hubs like Chicago, et cetera. We're just starting to feel the financial impacts of this poor host railroad performance as the costs are rising and the revenues are dropping. Section 213 of the 2008 PREA Act authorized the STB to investigate if an Amtrak train's on-time performance falls below 80% for 2 consecutive quarters. Today, we don't have a single long-distance train that hits that mark. We don't have a single train that's hit 80% this fiscal year to date. Most of them aren't even close. Not only are the delays increasing, but the magnitude of the delays are increasing as well. It would be bad enough if we had more trains that were late, but now they're missing their scheduled arrival time by progressively greater and greater margins. The chart that you see on the screen captures the total minutes of delay for each of our Class 1 hosts for which the carrier is responsible. As you can see, it's risen across the board, and the Empire Builder in particular has been seriously affected. There are numerous indications that the situation is worsening, not improving. Long-distance trains are particularly hard hit. The long-distance service on-time performance are currently down 21.4 percentage points in this fiscal year versus last fiscal year to date. In July, the Washington to Chicago Capital Limited train arrived on time only 1.6% of the time at the endpoint terminals and 19.6% of the time at intermediate stations along the way. The California Zephyr managed an 8.1 endpoint on-time performance in the same month. Both the delays and the overall magnitude of the delays continue to increase. As this situation worsens, the word spreads, our ridership falls off. The Empire Builder's revenues, for example, are 18% lower than they were at this time last year. That's by far the biggest decrease among our long-distance services. We've already worked with the railroad and added time to the schedule of the Empire Builder to help the railroad recover, but despite some improvements, the train is still arriving late more than 70% of the time. The negative impacts on Amtrak include our service becomes less trip time competitive, our revenues reduced, we have mixed connections for our passengers to other trains, we're driving customers away from the train and damaging our brand, and it also forces us to steal cars from other services in order to make up for the fact that the train's so late. The Empire Builder gets late to Seattle, and instead of having everybody wait to leave Seattle to head the other way, we've made up a separate consist that we keep up there that's ready, so it'll always leave on time at the end point. It just loses time along the way. That forces us to spend more money on maintenance and other services as we have to have faster turns in New Orleans and LA, et cetera. These trends have shown little hope of reversing themselves, and some kind of action will be required to address them. If they're not addressed, the quality of the transportation we provide to our customers will continue to deteriorate. That's an issue for them. It's also an issue for the 19 state partners who work with us and fund part of our operations on many of the host railroads. It's also an issue for the federal government, which will have to meet Amtrak's operating costs when, not if, but when, they continue to rise. Amtrak is happy to join the hosts if they want to seek funding for additional capacity, but the hosts must demonstrate that they've made the decision to take our passenger train performance seriously and address the operational and maintenance issues that impede our trains on their lines. We previously urged this board to require each Class 1 host to report to the STB on the steps it was taking to reduce delays to Amtrak trains whose monthly on-time performance fell below 80%. Again, since we made that request in April, the situation has only worsened, and I want to close this statement by reiterating the importance of the STB oversight and monitoring of the performance on host railroads. We urgently need your assistance in this matter, and we believe that an STB reporting requirement will both demonstrate attention and focus and provide all parties with a clear understanding of the challenges that we have. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. I thank the board members, and I thank all the rail customers in the room for their comments today. It's given me a bigger perspective, and I hope in my couple of minutes I can offer a different perspective as well. My name is Bruce Glover. I'm a vice president with the Brotherhood of Maintenance Away Employees, a division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. We are the union that represents the men and women that construct and maintain railroad tracks, bridges, and buildings. This is my 40th year in the industry, and I have spent all 40 years up here on the northern tier on the Great Northern, Northern Pacific, and SP&S lines. I also represent on Montana Rail Link since it started in 1986. As a representative of railroad employees, I do study every day the capacity and the service issues that are currently going on. I make that part of my job. I care about them, and I help where I can when the railroad needs help to get something changed to do it better. But I ask the board and all of the customers in the room to understand that we too have problems with the railroad, some of it related to this capacity. The railroad is short on employees. They've been short on employees for a long time, several years. They know about it, we've told them about it, and until very recently, they've done very little about it. In 2011, I wrote to BNSF, and I described the employee shortage and described the impact that that shortage was having. They wrote me back and said we weren't short on employees, we just had too many vacancies. In January and March of 2014, I again wrote BNSF and I detailed the exact employee count shortage using the railroad's own documents, and I explained that in the Twin Cities District, which is North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota, so the area we're talking about, there were 100 fewer maintenance employees in July of 2013 than there were in July of 2009. And there's a lot more trains in July of 2013 than there were in July of 2009. And in addition to 100 fewer maintenance employees in July of 2013, we had 100 vacant positions. These are positions advertised that there is no one to fill them because there are no more employees. Now I concede there's some improvements been made. When I look at the July 2014 Twin City District list, the 100 jobs that were cut since 2009 have been restored, so it puts us back now to 2009 staffing levels. But that same list has 120 vacancies, jobs that they need and want filled, but there are no employees to fill in July of 2014. Likewise, to look at our large rail and tie, our production gangs, in July of 2014, 180 vacant positions on the production gangs. That's in the middle of the construction season when we should be, as they say, making hay. I'll give you an example of what these shortages mean. Just last week, we had a high-speed tamping crew on the main line track between Fargo and Minot, the BNSF-KO subdivision. Tamping crew is a highly sophisticated, multi-million-dollar group of machines that grabs the rail, raises it a little, tamps the rock, levels smooth so the train can go as fast as possible. So the sophisticated tamp machine starts its work, picks the rail, the ties don't come up with the rail. Spikes roll under the rail, the tie plates get skewed. Those are all FRA track defects. So at the end of the day, that 60-mile-an-hour track is now 25-mile-an-hour track. So what happens? They park the sophisticated tamping machines. They send the machine operators back who are not tooled. They don't have the equipment. They're back to straighten tie plates and spikes. And so what happens is, for several days, that track stays at 25 miles an hour. And why does this happen? It's because there's no local forces available to support the mechanized equipment doing this work. It should also mean something else to you, and that is the ties in that particular location of a mainline track are so bad they don't come up with the rail, and there is no tie gang scheduled to replace those ties this year, or we wouldn't be out there surfacing. Another example of what the shortage means is when I look at the April to August 2014 average daily slow orders on the Twin Cities division, which again is North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, they're measured in minutes. The minutes are double in 2014 than they were in 2013. So it's another indication that we are behind. There is not enough people to maintain to this level of service. But there's another impact of this shortage, and it's important to us, and that is the employees that are out here are working day and night and day, doing their best, giving it their all to try to keep the whole thing bolted together. And I know because they tell me they're stretched, they're stressed, and they're feeling abused. The railroad, with the hair on fire management because of this shortage, has pushed and shoved these employees every which way, wherever, whenever it needs them today, tomorrow, or yesterday. And in order to do that, I mean, these are all collective bargaining agreement employees. In order to do that, you got to ignore their seniority and abuse their collective bargaining agreement. That's a concern to us. We start contract negotiations November 1st. It's a long, drawn-out process, but nobody wants to start it when the company's not honoring its current agreements or when it decides it wants to start a tug-of-war with the employees. So these issues are important. It's my 40th year in the industry. I want it to be successful. It's been very good to me. I want it to remain successful, but we think it's important, vitally important, when we have discussions about rail service issues, that rail labor, the employees, be incorporated into those discussions. I think they can bring another perspective that may not be incorporated in the current discussion. We can't just accept the railroad's view that everything's okay, it was just a bad winter, because that's not necessarily true. All of rail labor has something to contribute to these discussions, but I think in particular with the increase in crude oil, maintenance employees have really taken on a very a more critical role, and every day they're out there dodging more and more dangerous trains. So I think that the maintenance piece of this really has to be incorporated to these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. Thanks to both of you. Just a clarification, Mr. Glover, with respect to your comments, I mean, they were regarding BNSF?
Yeah, they are. That's the property I came off of that I know most about.
Right.
I could tell you CP numbers on their maintenance force. If I look at the same July 2009 to July 2014, what I gave you in the BN, CP maintenance force is up 50.
And with respect to the, you're just strictly talking about maintenance of way.
Exactly
You're not
correct.
referring to train and engine.
Exactly.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that for the record and for my own knowledge. Mr. Sadler, just a quick question. You alluded to that most of the I guess the trains, long-distance trains, that are not hitting the 80% number. And how do you view that as a service issue amongst the Class 1s or a preference issue as laid out in the statute, or maybe a combination?
Well, I think it's a combination, and it's a preference issue as laid out in the statute, but I'll sit here and very clearly say, I don't envy the BNSF because they're in a situation where basically they've got 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. Somebody previously talked about trains being parked. Well, when they park trains, and they have to do it for whatever reasons they do, they're no longer sidings to put freight trains in so Amtrak trains can go by. So it's really a congestion issue. Preference is statutorily required, but the service aspect of it comes in place too. The dispatchers almost get to a point where they don't have a choice and they've got to back us up. And again, I don't want to praise the BNSF, but they really have done a great job in working with us and communicating. Last week we took the entire Empire Builder ride with the Vice President for Passengers on the BN, and slow order by slow order. He said, look, here's where we're replacing ties, here's where we've got work taking place, and we're working very closely with them to adjust the schedules. We'll probably add a little bit of time. As I think you know, we have detoured around on the KO sub in order to stay out of the congested places. So they are working with us to try to make it better, but better has turned out to be 16% or so. So we've got a lot of work to do.
And when did you see, I know the numbers were higher last year at some point, significantly higher. When did you see that downturn start to occur with respect to the on-time performance?
We can show, we've got the slide. It's really been continuing to deteriorate over the last year or so. Specifically, Mark, if you can bring it up, the last 6 months has been pretty significant. Okay. And we have the data for you.
It's in the record, though?
Yes.
Okay.
You can see on this chart, you can see month by month, the bottom line is this year. And it got a little better in the April timeframe, but since April, May, it's really gone down.
Thank you. Vice Chairman?
So based on the dialogue you've had with BNSF and what you know about their capital improvement program, do you have a notion or sort of a sense about when the service level for Amtrak might be able to improve and how much it would improve once that full capital program is carried out?
I don't think I have a full sense for that. Based on the conversations, we know when their slow orders are coming off, and it was referenced earlier sometime in the October timeframe, but then they start construction again in February, March. So it's going to be a continuing process over the next couple of years. They're putting, as you know, record levels of capital into their infrastructure, but that work impedes our progress.
So based on what you know about what they're planning to do, what you know about, sort of your business, the way Amtrak trains run, you would foresee that these hugely delayed trains are going to continue into the foreseeable future. You're not seeing any daylight at the end of the tunnel.
I'm not overly optimistic, no.
And do you, from the perspective of Amtrak, have a set of approaches that you think could help relieve the situation?
From our point of view, we're working to modify the schedules to make them more aligned with the work that's being done. We're also moving the consist so we have more cars available as we suffer these late trains, and we're doing as good a job as we can of notifying the passengers that, hey, there's a good chance of this train being late.
Do you have a set of items you've asked the freight railroads to do to help relieve the situation that to date they've been unwilling to do?
Really, it's the consistency of the communication. We're just starting electronic delay reporting where we can sit down and we can see minute by minute why the delays are taking place and where they're taking place. In the past, we've done that all manually and literally with the curled faxed paper. So I think this is going to go a long way to getting the right data on the table so we can sit right across and say, okay, we're seeing huge numbers between here and here. What can we do to fix that?
And you said that process has just started?
It's just rolling out now. The pilot is finished and it's just rolling out now.
And when you say rolling out, so how long will it take before it's rolled out?
By the end of this calendar year, it will be across the network.
Okay, thank you.